Hello, everybody. The assessment policy is the work of primarily the work of the sub-TWG on classroom assessment, but it is also the work of the bureaus of secondary education, elementary education. It's also the work of the national TWG. It's also the work of, to a large extent, Brother Armin, because at every stage of the revision, we would consult him and ask him if this was acceptable. Um, we are proud to show you that the DepEd Order number 8 of 2015, Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program, will be released today. We are excited because what we have done is we have collated all the feedback from the various stakeholders of the assessment policy, from central office to regional office to division office, and of course, some schools. No? We couldn't, of course, consult all schools, but some schools, so that we could pull together their feedback on the assessment system. Another consideration is that the assessment system has to make sense also for alternative learning system, and that the connections are imaginable. At the moment, the articulation of the assessment system for ALS isn't there yet. However, it was very important that while we were crafting the policy guidelines for classroom assessment, that we could immediately see how we could translate this in alternative ways. So let me begin with the theoretical basis. Just like the K-12 basic education program, we are drawing from constructivist theory. And the main thing that we are trying to do is to ensure that during the assessment process, appropriate assessment is used to ensure learner success to move from guided practice to independent display of knowledge, understanding, and skills. So we actually start from learners, where learners are. And in so doing, we also recognize the value of explicit instruction so that we know what sort of instruction is required at the beginning of a lesson, during the lesson for guided practice, and of course, after the lesson for independent practice. We also want to make sure and enable learners to transfer knowledge, understanding, and skills successfully into future contexts. The other thing that we draw from the zone of proximal development idea of Vygotsky is that we need assessment to facilitate the development of higher order thinking skills and 21st century skills as articulated in the basic education program. On the next slide, we also emphasize that the assessment system of the K-12 recognizes the diversity of learners inside the classroom. We need to remember that we cannot craft an assessment system that is applicable only to one community. We need to recognize that in cities, mountains, rural areas, fishing villages, there are mixes of cultures, religions, languages, and of course, people. And therefore, that leads us to number 2, that we need to assess in various ways and in multiple ways so that we can tap onto the learner's potentials and abilities so that in the assessment process, learners are co-participants. In the constructivist theory, it's very important to emphasize that the teachers and the learners participate in a joint assessment process. And what we are trying to do here is we're trying to make instruction, or rather, make assessment inform instruction. And it should be always in unity. What is a classroom assessment? Let's go to the bits of it already. The third thing about classroom assessment is that we're going to use it to track learner progress in relation to the learner or learning competencies and curriculum standards that are articulated in our curriculum. So the most important idea here is that the assessment system dovetails with the curriculum. The fourth thing is that it provides us a basis for profiling students vis-a-vis these competencies. In other words, what we are able to do, we've been able to articulate the learning competencies in a good sequence in our curriculum guides. Our curriculum guides are well arranged from first quarter to fourth quarter, following a sequence of easy to difficult. In the same way, by following the curriculum guides and making sure that assessment is connected to curriculum, we make sure that we are also following the curriculum guides in the assessment of competencies, again, from easy to difficult. And we should be able to profile children who are able to work with the easier competencies, have trouble with the more difficult competencies, and follow them through. While we do assessment, and because assessment in the classroom is equally important to teacher and student, we have to help students develop self-reflection and personal accountability for their own learning. That's why they have to know exactly how they are doing at any given point in time. Using classroom assessment as a process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do will definitely lead to better teaching. Number 7, classroom assessment method should be consistent with curriculum standards. Whenever we assess in the classroom, we make sure that our assessment is consistent with the objectives of the lesson. And naturally, teachers should make sure that the objectives of every lesson are hinged on the curriculum standards. And finally, number 8, we need to be able to see what sort of competencies or what competencies are already covered by the children. And always the point of view is we want to know how they are progressing on the competencies. So what is assessed in the classroom? Assessed are content standards, performance standards, and learning competencies. Content standards cover a specified scope of sequential topics within each learning area or strand, domain, theme, or component. They answer the question, what should learners know? Performance standards, on the other hand, describe the abilities and skills that learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards and also demonstrate integration of 21st century skills. They answer the following questions. What can learners do with what they know? How well must learners do their work? How well do learners use their learning or understanding in different situations? How do learners apply their learning or understanding in real-life contexts? And what tools and measures should learners use to demonstrate what they know? Finally, the smaller bits are learning competencies. Learning competencies refer to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that learners need to demonstrate in every lesson or learning activity. To align with to align the assessment process with the K-12 curriculum, we adapted the cognitive process dimensions, which may be used as a guide to the formulation of assessment tasks and activities. These are based on Bloom's taxonomy, but they are an upgrade of the Bloom's taxonomy, and it starts with remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and then ends up with evaluating and creating. The descriptors for every level are on your slide, and they're definitely on the department order. So I will refer you to the department order. But let me cite you an example of how we are connecting and how we need to think about the K-12 basic education assessment system or framework for the classroom, and how we are migrating to this system from DepEd Order 73. So just an example, for example, curriculum standards, which are articulated in content and performance standards. And let us, for example, just get one of the first component of K-POP, of DepEd Order 73, knowledge. So what should students know? How are they to express or provide evidence of what they know? In the cognitive process dimensions, we can tap onto two, which would be remembering. The learner can identify, retrieve, recognize, duplicate, list, memorize, repeat, and reproduce. And applying. The learner can execute, implement, demonstrate, dramatize, interpret, solve, use, illustrate, convert, and discover. So this is a way of looking at how we are migrating from one assessment system to another. Here's another example for process. Process, on DepEd Order 73, asks the questions, what can students do with the information or facts they have in relation to familiar situations? Number 2, what are the evidence of what they can do with the information and facts they have? In the K-12 assessment system, this would intersect with understanding, applying, and analyzing. When we look at understanding, which answers the questions, what breadth of understanding do the students have regarding the information and facts that they know? And what are the evidence of the breadth and depth of understanding that the students have reached? And this now interfaces with understanding, applying, analyzing, and evaluating. And finally, for performance or product, DepEd Order 73 asks 2 questions. What innovations in terms of products and performance are learners able to do? And what are the evidence that learners can use or transfer their learning in real life or different situations? This intersects mostly with applying and creating. So with this kind of migration from one system to the other, what we're able to do is to connect better our content and performance standards with our assessment system. Now, how are learners assessed in the classroom? We drew from the UNESCO Program on Teaching and Learning for Sustainable Futures, and it defines formative assessment as ongoing forms of assessment closely linked to the learning process, and it is informal. It provides immediate feedback to both learner and teacher. It helps prepare learners for summative assessments, and it is recorded but not included as basis for grading. So when is formative assessment done? Okay. So if you have a lesson and we have 3 essential parts of a lesson, these are the bare minimum parts of the lesson: before the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson, then we have different purposes for formative assessment for each part. So for example, before the lesson, the purposes for the learner correspond to the purposes for the teacher. The emphasis of formative assessment is that information must be usable by both teacher and learner. So for example, for the learner, know what he or she knows about the topic or lesson. On the other side of the column, for the teachers, is to get information about what the learner already knows and can do about the coming lesson or the new lesson. So what we've done is we've matched what learners and teachers should do with the information. For the next one, which is during the lesson, again, we've done the same thing. No? Based on the feedback from so many people on this department order on classroom assessment, we've been able to do this by trying to see what happens during a lesson and trying to help teachers clarify in their minds what they should be doing while they are teaching. So for example, while they are teaching, let's say it's a group activity, then the teacher should be able to provide immediate feedback to the learners. So the learners will know what their strengths and weaknesses are. They should be able to identify learning gaps for the learner so that the student or the children will be able to help themselves overcome these learning gaps. For after the lesson, there are other purposes also. For example, for the learner to tell and recognize whether he or she met the learning objectives and of course, met the success criteria for that particular lesson. On the teacher side, the teacher has to assess whether the learning objectives have been met for a specified duration, whether he or she needs to remediate or enrich, and of course, if you need to do some reteaching again. After formative assessment, the second component of classroom assessment is called summative assessment. Summative assessment may be seen as the assessment of learning. So, summative assessment usually occurs towards the end of a period of learning in order to describe the standard reached by the learner. In other words, it's always looking at the learner's performance in relation to a particular standard. Using the UNESCO definition, Summative assessment is comprised of judgments derived that are usually for the benefit of other people other than the learner. So if formative assessment is for direct classroom use, summative assessment may include other people. And who might they be? Siyempre, obviously parents, obviously school heads, and if necessary, summative assessments will have to inform those who are giving out scholarships, those who are providing children with opportunities to support their education. So summative assessment must be very seriously taken. The results of summative assessment are recorded and are included in the computation of the final grade. Now, what are the components of summative assessment? There are three: written work, performance task, and quarterly assessment. So what's written work? Written work in summative assessment ensures that students are able to express learned skills and concepts in written form. And these may include essays, written reports, long quizzes, and other such written output. For example, they will convert a short story to a play. That would be written work. Okay? Performance tasks allows learners to show what they know and are able to do in diverse ways. They also may create or innovate products or do performance-based tasks. Written output may also be considered performance tasks depending on the learning area. In performance tasks, the focus is on the performance, not the product, not the project, but the way to get to the product. So in other words, we are looking more at process. We want to avoid this thing where we grade the project and it was the father who made the project, diba? Or the brother. What we want to do is to be able to track the stages of product development by looking at how the student actually made it. And finally, the quarterly assessment measures student learning at the end of the quarter, and this may be in the form of objective tests, an objective test. It may be in the form of performance-based assessment, particularly important for applied areas like sport, art, tech voc. But it can also be, and I think this is a good thing, a combination of the two. For written work, it is strongly recommended that items in long quizzes or tests be distributed across the cognitive process domains so that our long tests and quizzes don't just focus on remembering or worse, it only focuses on the critical and the analysis. We need a good spread because we must allow the diverse children in our classroom to show what they know. Our tests are not designed only for those who can show what they know on difficult items. Our tests should allow all learners to show what they know and what they can do. Appendix A of DepEd Order 8 was developed by a large group of people, and it has a list of examples of summative assessment tools per learning area. Formative assessment and summative assessment can be done individually or collaboratively. For example, in formative assessment, individual assessment will demonstrate what the learner has learned or mastered by showing it as an individual. Or they can do it collaboratively. One way is by peer assessment when group mates rate each other, for example, or group mates give feedback on how well he or she performed or contributed to a group output. Or collaborative assessment might also be a classroom project or a poster made by the class. And of course, the assessment would be done for the entire group. The importance of collaborative assessment cannot be downplayed. You know, it's very important to allow children to work together because collaborative work is an essential feature of 21st century thinking. Summative assessment at an individual level, obviously, unit tests and quarterly assessments are done individually. And for group activities such as putting out a play or mounting an exhibit or doing a performance exhibit, these things are collaboratively done. And therefore, there must be very clear instructions to students what they are expected to do first, and second, very clear indicators to students on how they will be assessed on what they are expected to do. So let's go to the grading system. For kindergarten, the grading of kindergarten is very qualitative, right? We're not using numerical grades in kindergarten. We use a lot of checklists, anecdotal records, portfolios, compilations of children's work. And these are now shown to parents, and parents see what their children are able to do over time. I think the trick here is to remember that in showing what kindergarteners can do, we must need to show it as time progresses. You cannot show it at one point in time, because these little children, they learn very fast and develop very fast, and we need to record them. For grades 1 to 12, learners are graded on the 3 components: written work, performance tasks, and the quarterly assessment. And this is given, obviously, every quarter. Kasi quarterly assessment, di ba? Okay. These components are given percentage, weights, and these vary by learning area. Third, all grades are based on weighted raw scores of the summative assessments. And fourth, the minimum grade needed to pass a learning area is 60 on the raw scores. And this is transmuted to 75 on the report card. So let me emphasize, the passing grade is 75 on the report card. But this is based on the raw scores of on the weighted raw scores on summative assessments. And that weighted raw score is hinged on 60 as passing. So if you give a quiz and you have 10 items on your quiz, the passing grade on your quiz is 6/10. There's another aspect to this that I must emphasize, and it will become clearer why later when I talk about the end of the school year, is that we have established, or we have decided, that we will have a floor grade on the report card. In other words, every subject will have a final grade, and that final grade cannot go lower than 60. Okay? So the lowest mark that can appear on a report card is 60. But from 74 to 60, failed na. Does not meet expectations already. I'll explain later why, okay, as we proceed. Now, how is learner progress recorded and computed? First, we add all the grades of learners' work, and this will result in the total score for every component. We divide the total score by the highest possible score of all these assessments, and then we multiply the quotient by 100%, and this will result in a percentage score. We convert the percentage score to the weighted score because the weights differ according to learning areas. We multiply the percentage score by the weight of the component, which is indicated in tables 4 and 5 of the classroom assessment policy. We add the weighted score of each component, and the result will be the initial grade. This initial grade is then transmuted using another table, our transmutation table, which is also on DepEd Order number 8. That transmutation table is already specified na, point by point, grade by grade. Table 6 of the DepEd Order shows an example of a class record, and it also shows the step-by-step computation of these grades. So, how are grades computed at the end of the school year? For kindergarten, as I said earlier, there are no grades, just descriptors. For grades 1 to 10, the average of the quarterly grade produces the final grade. And then, the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all final grades by the total number of learning areas. And I need to emphasize, each learning area has equal weight. Grades 11 and 12 is a little different. The average of the quarterly grades produces the semestral final grade. And the general average is computed by dividing the sum of all semestral final grades by the total number of learning areas for a semester. So in grades 1 to 10, there's one general average. In grades 11 and 12, there's a semestral general average. Because in senior high school, there are courses that are prerequisites of each other. And so we need to shift our thinking from yearly general averages to semestral general averages. Then how do we describe these grades? The summary of learner progress is shown quarterly to parents and guardians through a parent-teacher conference in which the report card is discussed. In other words, we don't issue the report cards. We discuss the student progress. And we are following, well, it's very similar descriptors. Outstanding, very satisfactory, satisfactory, fairly satisfactory, and did not meet expectations. So, outstanding is 90 to 100, and then that's cascaded down. And below 75 would be the grade for someone who did not meet expectations. The final grade in each learning area and general average are reported as whole numbers. In other words, there will be no decimals on the report card. Okay? Now, how are they promoted and retained at the end of every school year? For grades 1 to 3 learners, the final grade of at least 75 in all learning areas, when a student earns that child is promoted to the next grade level. If a child, for example, did not meet expectations in not more than 2 learning areas, this child must pass remedial classes for learning areas with a failing mark so that he or she will be promoted to the next grade level. Otherwise, the learner is retained in the same grade level. If a student did not meet expectations in 3 or more learning areas, then the student is retained in the same grade level. For grades 4 to 10, if a final grade of at least 75 is earned in all learning areas, the student is promoted to the next level. If the student did not meet expectations in not more than 2 learning areas, we do the same thing. The student attends remedial classes for the learning areas with a failing mark, and that student must pass these remedial classes to be promoted to the next grade level. Otherwise, the student is retained. If a student did not meet expectations in 3 or more learning areas, then the student is again retained in the grade level. To earn the elementary certificate and to be promoted to junior high school, the student must pass all learning areas in the elementary. To earn the junior high school certificate and to be promoted to senior high school, the student must pass all learning areas in junior high school. In other words, you do not carry back subjects to senior high. And you do not carry back subjects from elementary to junior high. It's nice to finish things, wrap things up before you move on to the next level. Okay? The remedial classes are very important. And in the DepEd order, there is strong emphasis that if at a certain quarter, any given quarter, by the 5th week of that quarter, the student is already showing signs of having difficulty on the formative and summative assessments, the teacher must already call for the parents for a parent-teacher discussion on student performance to try and figure out what's going on there, why is the child having difficulty, and most important of all, how the child will be supported by both the home and the school. If we do this in our classrooms, we should avoid having a lot of children not meeting expectations at the end of the school year. So it's very important that we are vigilant and preventing failure rather than waiting for failure to happen. But when it does happen, it happens. DepEd has to DepEd has to act accordingly. So if a student really does not pass those remedial classes in more than 2 subject areas, then the child will have to be retained in grades 4 to 10. For grades 11 and 12, again, it is a little different. Okay? Still the same on the passing grade. Final grade of at least 75 in all learning areas in a semester is earned. The student can proceed to the next semester. If a learner did not meet expectations in a prerequisite subject in a learning area, that student must pass remedial class for failed competencies in that subject before being allowed to enroll in the higher subject in that learning area. For example, in STEM, there's pre-calculus and then basic calculus. If a student is not able to meet expectations in some of the competencies in pre-calculus, that student will have to make up for it. And when we say make up, that means summative assessments during that make-up period. And if and when that student passes those failed competencies, we let that student carry on to the next semester towards basic calculus. The same is true for TechVoc, because these TechVoc courses are sequenced, diba? Automotive 1, Automotive 2, and so on and so forth. And therefore, you cannot go to Automotive 3 if you haven't passed Automotive 1. The third qualification, if a learner did not meet expectations in any subject or learning area at the end of the semester, we do the same thing. The student must pass remedial classes in failed competencies in the subjects or learning areas to be allowed to enroll in the next semester. Otherwise, the learners must retake the subjects failed. And syempre, to be able to pass senior high school and earn the senior high school certificate, we must pass, or learners must pass, all subjects or learning areas in senior high school. Again, it's very important to emphasize that immediate remedial classes in senior high school is critical so that they don't fail and so they don't get delayed by a semester. It's very important that we immediately do the assessments in the classroom so we prevent these failures from happening. But what if indeed a student did not meet expectations at the end of a period? How are they rated in remedial class? And I think this is one of the things that is most important in our new classroom assessment policy, is we actually articulate how do we deal with those who get marks lower than expectations. So first, summative assessments are also given during remedial class. These are computed, weighted, transmuted in the same way as the quarterly grade. The equivalent of the final grade for the remedial class is called the remedial class mark. The final grade at the end of the school year and the remedial class mark are averaged. And this is why you see it is important to have a floor grade in our final grade. And if the recomputed final grade is 75 or better for grades 1 to 10, the student is promoted to the next grade level. For grades 11 and 12, where there are prerequisites, the student is allowed to enroll in the higher level learning area. Number 5, if the recomputed final grade is still below 75, in other words, the final grade in the card is already 74, and then after remediation, and then the recomputation of the grade, it's still 74, then, for grades 1 to 10, the student is retained in the grade level. For grades 11 and 12, the student needs to retake that subject. And for grades 11 and 12, where there are prerequisites, the student will not be allowed to enroll in the higher learning area subject. Now, our recomputed final grade must be issued in a certificate. And this must be signed, that the teacher of that remedial class issues that certificate of recomputed final grade. And then this is noted by the principal and forwarded to the division office. It is attached to Form 137 and School Form number 5. And in our DepEd order, number 8, there is a sample certificate of recomputed final grades. Now, so let's look at an example. Okay? How are learners promoted and retained at the end of the school year? This is a scenario for STEM. So in the subjects, core, and applied and specialized track subjects, there's a failure on pre-calculus and the student got a 74. The learner will have to take remedial classes or sessions for specific competencies that were failed. Okay? And if the student still fails, then that student will have to retake pre-calculus as a back subject. The learner, however, we must support the student with career counseling. And guidance teachers and career advocates will have to talk to this student already so that the student can clarify what is going on in his career choice and if this career choice is actually a good choice. The learner should be, the other thing is that when the learner takes a back subject, the learner becomes delayed because you cannot proceed to the next higher level. So it's really important to start remediation by the 5th week of the quarter. Scenario number 2. Let us say that the student has trouble with 2 subjects. In this particular example, there's a 72 on personal development and again a 74 on general chemistry. Then after remedial classes or sessions, the first learner gets the following grades. Personal development and general chemistry continue to be 74. Then this student will have to retake these 2 subjects, okay, as back subjects. But we're trying to avoid back subjects, no? But we don't want to keep them naman. We don't want to retain them because it's difficult for senior high school to retain them in the semester, right? Because we are still functioning on an annual basis. So they will just have to take these subjects next sem. But for example, learner B already passes general chem, then that student goes to chem 2. But that student now continues to have difficulty with personal development. Then that student will have to re-enroll in personal development. And hopefully, the guidance teachers, the ESP teachers in that school can focus a little bit on this student who needs some help. Now, that's the part of our assessment system that is focusing on cognitive development in relation to learning standards or curriculum standards and our competencies. There's another half, actually, it's another half of our assessment system for the classroom. And these are our core values. How are core values of the Filipino child reflected in the report card? DepEd Order 8 draws from the vision, mission, and core values of the Department of Education. Now, let me just focus on the 4 core values: makadiyos, makakalikasan, makatao, at makabansa. By balancing our viewpoint on competency development and content knowledge development and looking at our core values as Filipinos, as learners in the Philippines, we need to be able to operationalize how we actually rate, based on good observations, the demonstration of these core values. We will choose one of the core values as an example, and this is shown in the next slide. we are looking at the core value of Makatao. And what we've done is we've looked at that core value. We've collected various versions of a DepEd report card that have been used over the last few 2 decades. Yes. And then we collected these behavior statements. We collected the behavior statements and separated these behavior statements from indicators. Because the indicators are smaller behavior statements in relation to the bigger behavior statements. And some of these behavior statements and indicators were categorized in different ways. For example, some of them were under conduct, good manners and right conduct, deportment, character traits. For our present DepEd order number 8, we're just calling them behavior statements and then indicators. For example, in Makatao, the core values Makatao, the big behavior statement is sensitive to individual, social, and cultural differences. And we have suggestions of indicators. For example, shows respect for all, waits for one's turn, takes good care of borrowed things, views mistakes as learning opportunities, upholds and respects the dignity and equality of all, including those with special needs, volunteers to assist others in times of need, recognizes and respects people from different economic, social, and cultural backgrounds. The second big behavior statement is this demonstrates contributions towards solidarity. And in this one, we have smaller behavior indicators such as cooperates during activities, recognizes and accepts the contribution of others towards a goal, considers diverse views, communicates respectfully, accepts defeat, and celebrates others' successes, enables others to succeed, and speaks out against and prevents bullying. So if these behavior statements are the ones that are reflected on the report card, the indicators are what schools must use. What we have specified in our DepEd order is that non-DepEd schools may modify or adopt these guidelines as appropriate to their school's philosophy, vision, mission, and core values. Because there's a diverse articulation of these across non-DepEd schools. Fourth, we've also given some flexibility. Schools may craft additional indicators for behavior statements. And I think that this is important because behavior statements and indicators, rather, will vary according to age. You'll expect simpler behaviors or expressions of behavior from children in grades 1 and 3 from those that you expect from children in grades 10, 11, and 12. The schools must also ensure that if they will create new indicators in addition to the ones that we have specified in our DepEd order, these indicators must be gender fair and culturally appropriate, child-centered, and of course, age-appropriate. We will use a non-numerical rating. The last thing we do is to grade these things, right? We will use a non-numerical rating, and it's a simple rating about how frequently do you observe it, right? And therefore, it's important for the class advisor and other teachers in the grade level, to agree. 1, how are they going to observe? And 2, how frequently they are going to observe. And 3, how are they going to record these observations? So that everybody is given a fair chance at being observed. The marking that we have specified is always observed, sometimes observed, rarely observed, and not observed. We also have specified in DepEd order number 8 that when a child seems to have difficulty displaying the behaviors on our indicators, then there has to be a meeting together with the parents on possible reasons why the student is not expressing him or herself or showing this behavior in relation to the core values. Finally, how is attendance reported? Okay. A learner's attendance shall be recorded by the teachers every day. And then the attendance is reflected monthly in the report card at the end of every quarter. So we have our typical number of school days, and then the number of days present by the child, and then the number of days when the child was not in school. Now, if a student incurs absences of more than 20% of the prescribed number of class or laboratory periods during the school year or semester, this will result in a failing grade. However, school heads may issue exemptions should the learner have reasons that are valid, and these valid reasons are recognized by the school. When absences cannot be avoided, the school must give the learner alternative methods and materials that will correspond to the topics and competencies that were or will be missed. And I need you to note that were or will be missed, because we already have in our possession at the department alternative delivery mode materials. We have alternative learning system materials which can be given to these students should the expected attendance be compromised by either sickness or other family issues that cannot be avoided. Finally, this is the example. Finally na nga ba? Yes, finally. This is the example of the report card for grades 1 to 10. You have the front and the back. The front and the back. They're pretty much the same as before. We have removed the comments part because the comments are very standard anyway. So it might be better to just have discussions with the parent. And then inside are already the learning areas and the report on observed values. And then for grades 11 and 12, it's pretty much the same for the face and the back. But inside the grades 11 and 12 report card are blanks, because the combination of subjects that will be taken in senior high school will vary from school to school. And therefore, it's the semestral averages will be comprised of different subjects. So even if everyone is required to take the core, it does not mean they take the core at the same time. So there's a little bit more handwriting work to do for senior high school, but that is the price of flexibility. With allowing schools to select what subjects they will offer in given semesters, there's a little bit more desk work to be done. That is the complete description of DepEd Order number 8. During the national training of trainers for teachers, as well as the mass training for teachers, the DepEd order itself will be discussed in more detail, including how to compute the grades. And I hope that this video will clarify some of the items on that DepEd order. However, maybe this video will not be necessary at all, because the DepEd order, after all, is more than 28 pages long. And the explanation for each of these parts are very, very, very detailed. So everyone, thank you very much for being here, and I hope this helps.